Hey, welcome back to another episode of Shifty Speed Shop. Haven't seen you guys in a while, been going through a few things, but wanted to get you guys out an episode. Got a buddy's square body pickup behind me. He came up from Nebraska for guard drill, and just shortly before he got to town, it started spewing fuel out of the vent on the fuel bowl. It's an old quadrajet. So why don't we take a look at it and see what we can do about this thing. We grabbed a kit and a float to see if we can get it back on the road so you can get back to work on Monday. So here's our victim of the day. So like I stated previously, he was going down the road and all of a sudden he had a geyser coming out of this thing and all over the top of the engine, choked it out, of course. So more than likely what happened was either there's a problem with the needle and seat or the float sunk. These things have kind of a poly float in them, and sometimes they'll become fuel logged or just a chunk of crap in the needle and seat. Either way, what we need to do is get this thing cracked open for him. We grabbed a kit. That way we'd have new gaskets. We'll throw a needle and seat in it. I've got a float there, and the old girl will go down the road. We are missing some linkages, as we found out on it, but quadrajets will run in pretty much any terrible shape that they're in. We'll get a few things fixed up on them. This is not a how to restore a carburetor and make it perfect. We're getting him back on the road in short order and getting him back to home. So follow along and we'll show you some steps and some things to look for. One of the first things we're going to do, you've got to remove your accelerator pump arm from the carburetor here. There's a little tiny, I think it's like a 3/32 roll pin, something of that nature right here. And what you need to do is punch it back towards the choke horn. And here's kind of a view from the top. Now, the rookie move is to push it all the way back against the choke horn, and then you can get it pushed back forward again, but you're going to have a heck of a time. So what you want to do is leave enough space in this pin. It'll go through the arm, but push it back, but leave enough space to be able to get a flathead screwdriver in here to wedge it forward on reassembly. So if you get a little overzealous with the old ball peen hammer and punch, you're gonna have a hard time. You can get in there with a needle nose and screw around and get it pushed back forward, but just stop short of making it hit the choke horn. You gotta be able to get a flathead screwdriver behind it. You push it forward on reassembly. So we're gonna knock that pin back, hopefully without pushing it too far. All right, so you can see how he successfully got this pin driven back, but we can still get this flathead screwdriver just barely behind it. The lever is out. Where is it? Oh, it's on the bench. Anyway, so when we go in for reassembly, we'll just give this a little push. There you go, there's the lever. And that's what you gotta do to get the accelerator pump lever off. Super easy, couple little taps. Just don't get crazy with it. You'll break the casting or do something dumb. All right, so there's a couple different styles of these. So this one looks like you can take the linkage off because this linkage runs through the main body of the carburetor, so you got to pop him off. This one has a screw up there. Some of the earlier ones don't, and what you have to do is you got to pull your choke housing off, take the 3 screws out, pull this, and then it'll let you pull the other end of this linkage off. But this is a little newer carburetor. This looks like one that has the electronic control that somebody's been modified. So anyhow, second thing you got to do is get your choke freed up. And now we can start pulling all the screws out of the top plate. So there are 2 screws down inside of here. You can just barely see them there. These are Torx. Right down there in the bottom of that, you can see where he's putting. And then all of the rest of these on the top plate of the carburetor, and we'll have all the all the internals exposed. So one thing I forgot to do first, you can take the screw out of this little guy, which we got out, and you can pick him square up. And your metering rods, whoops, sorry, let's get it in frame, hang off of that item. So the metering rods open with the secondary. So as your secondaries open more with more airflow, it picks them up out of the needle and seat. And if we take a look at them, you can see how they're tapered. So as you pull them further out, more fuel. So quadrajets are very vacuum sensitive. That's how they operate everything. But there is a small screw in the top of that. Take the screw out and pull your metering rods up. I guess here's where are we at? There's your funny looking little screw. Sits right in the top of this creature here. So don't forget your metering rods. So we're just popping the top off this thing. I'm trying to shove that choke linkage down through there. like I said, a lot of them you pull the choke off, but this has still got the original rivets in it, and the screws are inside of the choke housing. And I'm trying to be lazy right now and not drill the rivets out for the adjustment for the choke. So just always make sure there's 4 brass rods hanging that are into that top of the body. There you go, you can see them really well. Make sure you got all 4 of those, because I have seen them come out and drop down into the carburetor. So that thing looks like it's had a little bit of ethanol contamination in it. But let's keep on going deeper, see if we can get down to this float and whatnot. So it's just underneath, so your gasket comes up next. And it's probably gonna break in about, oh, is he getting it without?
Whatever this is holding it.
So that's your power piston, and it's actually, the gasket is slitted and goes underneath of it. So if you pick it up on the front and push back, it'll go back. You just have to have the entire gasket loosened up. That's kind of the tricky part, is getting it past that guy. So it's got like a little flap. So now we're down to, so this is your power piston, which is completely stuck. So there is no adjustability in your in your primary circuit. That's your accelerator pump. So we're gonna have to take probably a needle nose, grab onto this power piston, because this whole assembly will come out. There's just a little plastic seal that holds that in there. And then that's your primary metering rods, or your mid throttle. So there she goes, we got them loosened. So he also had a stuck power piston. I have no idea how this thing was running, probably very rich. But so that's your power piston. You wanna make sure that that moves freely. You'll see how it moves when we put it back together. And there'll be a spring underneath that guy. Okay, next thing is the float cover, that piece of black plastic. Let me pull that guy out. This is like real world. This isn't that Saturday morning car show crap where everything is pre-done. Okay, so now you can lift your float directly up, grab that little bail, and here comes your float.
Got a plastic float.
Yep. So that is the neoprene float, which may or may not be soaked with fuel. We're not even gonna try it at this point. And then, down in here, there's a spring underneath the accelerator pump to pull out. Once we get the needle and seat out, there should be, I think there's a screw down in here, if we can take a look past my big old finger. And there's actually a check ball underneath. That's your check ball for the accelerator pump. So we need to pull needle and seat and that check ball, so we want to make sure all that's clean. So here's your needle. Let's take a look at this guy. Come on, get in the camera. It doesn't look terrible. Well, come on, focus. Dang it. Anyway, they're aluminum, by the way. Don't drop those down your engine if you're pulling just the top off on the engine, because you won't pick them back out. So here comes the seat, which looks like it left the looks like the seam. So. And then I believe most of these had a little metal crush gasket underneath of it. Some of them had one of them red ones, but there's likely a little metal gasket down inside of there. So as he digs around, I bet he's trying to find that right now. Nice view of his elbow. That's a good elbow if I've ever seen one.
I don't think there's one in there.
So apparently there's no gasket on the needle and seat. That's pretty outstanding.
Oh yeah, there is.
Okay.
I need something smaller to get it out.
All right, so we'll come back once we get that out of there. All right, so we got everything out, flipped it over, and there is, she is gutted. Got the jets out and everything, so we can make sure everything is cleaned up good.
Watch your choke linkage when you flip it over.
Watch your choke linkage when you don't take it apart properly, so don't bend your linkage. And there's just a couple screws in the base plate. Looks like just a few of them there. Pull the base plate off so that way we can get to all of the rest of the passages. So, whoops, keep you guys up here watching. Sorry about that. I'm sure you enjoyed looking underneath my bench for a minute. Hey, this is YouTube. This is not a professional video studio. You guys are learning a hack way to get this thing to quit blowing fuel all over his engine, so just stay tuned. It'll work out. So when you pull this open, one thing that quadrajets are, I don't know, they have a bad reputation for. So there's plugs in the bottom of these, and this well goes into the fuel bowl. And somebody tried to put some sort of, I don't know if it's silicone or if it's two-part epoxy. It's not a marine tex though that you need to use, because they heard old Grandpa Joe talking about epoxying those shut. It's something that you can do. Some of them like to do it because right now the carburetor's upside down. So it's right side up. Overnight, all the fuel will drip down into the carburetor. I don't know that it's as big of an issue as people make it out to be, but you've got to use like a marine tex epoxy, because otherwise it just breaks down and gets soft like this crap does. And that might be some of his problems too. So somebody's been in here, which of course these carburetors are all 30, 40 years old. So it's definitely a thing that you're going to find. Anyway, we'll see if we can clean some of that up too on our way through this journey. So the next step is just cleaning, blowing through all the passages, making sure everything is good to go. Oh, hey, since he's holding this up, so these kits come with several different gaskets in them. So when we crack that carburetor kit open over here, I'm willing to bet that there's going to be several different ones. And what you do is you take your gasket that was on there and line it up and make sure all the holes and everything line up. And that's that's the easiest way to determine what the correct gasket is. So that's the gasket between the main body and the base plate. The base plate has your butterflies and stuff in it. So anyway, another little look, and more surprises we're finding as we're going through it. All right, so here's the float out of it, and I was just noticing something as it was starting to dry off. See how there's this darker spot on the float, and you see this nick where whoever was in here before must have kind of damaged it. This is we'll call it a foam material. But anyway, so I'm willing to bet that this float is fuel logged, and what's happening is everything else is evaporating off and all the fuel is starting to come out of it. So between having a needle and seat that wasn't sealing as well, and that float being a little heavy from fuel, it caused this thing to overrun. So what happened was he was pulling down the highway and started to slow down to come into a gas station, hit the clutch or whatever, and went from high load down to no load, and she started spitting fuel out of every orifice that it could out of the top of the carburetor. And so, like we suspected, this was probably our culprit. So that would be a fuel logged float, and you can see it as evidenced by the dark spot around the damage, the fuel coming out of it. So we're starting to crack into the old carburetor kit, and we're trying to teach an Army veteran how to read. It's a bit of a rough day.
It's got pictures.
So hey, one thing to know, if you buy a carburetor kit, let's get you up in frame again. They come sealed in that plastic. They are returnable until you pop the plastic. So make sure you don't pop a hole in it if you want to return it, because they will not take it back at that point. And by looking at how many gaskets are in there, this is definitely a multi-model kit. So we're gonna have to go do the old gasket aligning trick. So as he surgically opens the car kit
with my dull razor knife.
The only guy that has a razor knife that has replaceable blades is as dull as a dang butter knife.
It is serrated, see?
Ooh. Alright. So oh yeah, watch out for flying parts as you start pulling everything out of here. So you can see there's all the different types of gaskets. You got your air cleaner gasket there. Different carb body. There should be a thick one for the bottom. Sometimes they'll give you some screws, some randomness. I'm telling you, there's a little bit of everything in these. So you go through and you select what works best. There's a little ruler. Take a little look in here. So there's a ruler that's for adjusting your float. Those two funny looking clips, there should be 3 of them, are for replacement for your choke. I'm willing to bet that those screws are the ones that you're supposed to tap the housing to when you drill those rivets out that I showed you earlier. So there's probably, oh yep, there's a 3rd one hiding in there. So I'm kind of got a bad angle here. So you got 3 clips, 3 screws, that's for your choke housing to make it adjustable. A little bit of everything. So you go through, you find the parts. There should be like that item right there around that screw, that should be the gasket for the fuel filter. These round black ones, if I can get to them in the corner, are probably the seals for the throttle shafts. Anyway, a little bit of everything is in here. Oh, that's a replacement roll pin for the accelerator pump. And yeah, there's just a bunch of crap. Should be also a accelerator pump umbrella. Oh, there it is. And that's the installation tool and new spring. So he found the right gasket. He's got everything cleaned up. So we're going back together, the opposite of how we came apart. We're gonna throw the base on first.
Helps when you put the gasket on right.
If you get the gasket on right, it really helps. So what he's doing right now is there are pegs in these corners, and they're kind of alignment dowels. It looks like they must not be, the holes must not be manufactured quite properly. So a lot of times you'll actually find those dowels broken off. So anyhow, you can see how he just popped those through, pulls the gasket out and square. If you do open your carburetor up and those dowels are missing, not a big deal. It just makes it a little harder to keep the gasket in the right spot. So, all right, we'll continue getting this thing put together. We'll get the base plate thrown on, and we'll check in back with you guys. So what I've got him doing right now is he's actually putting the old, oops, here we go. Let's get this up here. All right, so what I've got him doing now, he just put the old check ball back in, and we're gonna use the hammer and the punch and just give it a light whack. And I mean, just a fairly soft blow. And what that'll do is that'll push that ball down into the seat, and just a little, about that much, maybe a little bit more, one more little one. There we go, perfect. So that steel ball will actually form that die cast body, and it'll help that check ball seat better. So now it's the old ball, you can just throw it away, whatever. It's like a BB. And then when we go for reassembly, he'll put the new ball in. So there it is. That's how you renew the seat for the check ball, and it keeps the accelerator pump working better. All right, so what we're gonna do now is put a new seal on the accelerator pump. They used to come with the whole pump, but now it's just the seal. It's kind of pain in the butt. So, and there is a spring inside, and what that does is just push the seal out to the walls. So you can take and disassemble the entire accelerator pump, but honestly, I usually just pull it right off the top. One-handed sucks. Something like that. So there we go. So I just pull the seal off the top, and I think you put the seal on first, then you put the spring in the center. They come separate. So there is this guide tool that comes with it, and you're supposed to use that to pull it down over so you don't rip it. I honestly just use like a paper clip or a small straight punch and kind of work it on there carefully. If you want to find a real video on rebuilding these things, I'm sure the internet's full of them. This is just trying to get somebody running down the road quick. So there you go.
How far down in there should it be?
Just below the surface. So what we're doing right now is we're getting the power piston put back in, and there's like a plastic retainer cap, and it'll go down in there. And see, now it's actually moving. If you guys remember when we took this thing apart, the power piston was seized in this carburetor. So that should give him a lot better part throttle fuel control. So even though we are definitely not doing the full rebuild on this thing, we'll call this a refresh, I guess. He should be good to go. So what that does is that controls another set of metering rods. There's a spring underneath it that pushes it in the air for full fuel. Whoop. You didn't get it quite seated. Anyway, when you get vacuum on it, it actually pulls it down, and that's part of how you control the part throttle fuel mixture. So you have your idle jets. Once you get into your part throttle circuit, then that guy takes over. So these carburetors are really vacuum dependent, and that's why if you have one that people have been messing around with, you're going to have problems with them, or if the throttle shafts are worn or anything. And that's where quadrajets get kind of a bad name. The only thing that a quadrajet honestly does poorly is that fuel bowl is tiny, and if you're actually drag racing with a real high horsepower engine and holding that high RPM, you'll run out of fuel, because with that one small needle and seat, you can't get enough fuel in the carburetor, and that's kind of the biggest problem with quadrajets. And that's where the Holleys have kind of taken over. But you can see now we're throwing the accelerator pump in, which we lubed that bore that it goes into, and the next thing will be the gasket. You got to kind of slip the gasket around the power piston assembly. So I guess it should be perforated. Yep. You see how he's just pulling that out. Hopefully he's pulling it the right direction, whether it's up or down. And get the thing put together. Oops, sorry. My normal camera people are jumping on a trampoline right now, and you can see I'm definitely not the camera person.
That's not right. You got it backwards, guys?
I think he's got it upside down. There we go. That looks better. All right, so right now he's just trying to push that, get that choke linkage up through the plate. It's kind of a spin it, Jenga it around. Get it all together. They can be a little bit frustrating. You just have to use patience, and when it's right, it'll go together. If it's, you don't force these carburetors because you will absolutely break a casting. So.
The other ones.
So, we now have the top plate back on, and it's just putting the screws back in. So we'll come back to you in a minute when we have something interesting to actually show you. All right, so it looks like he's got everything back together on it now. So if you wondered how it goes together, rewind the video and play it back again. It's the opposite of taking it apart. So check to make sure everything works. Quadrajets, when the choke is closed, the secondaries will not open, and I don't have two hands available right now to be able to move the linkages. But we've double checked, everything moves nicely, everything's nice and smooth. He should be ready to go, but we seem to have forgotten to get a fuel filter. So he's got to run back into town, get a fuel filter. We'll get this thing slammed on the pickup, and we'll do the test fire in the dark, I guess. See you back in a few. All right, so we got it put back together. We got it put on. We test fired it last night, but in the dark, you guys weren't going to be able to see much. Everything works as it should. I guess we'll give you a little startup and kind of a payoff on this. I know we didn't go through, we didn't soak it, we didn't make the outside pretty and everything, but you know what? He's got a running truck. He can make his 300-mile trip back home and get his butt to work in the morning. So, hey, it's a success. Sometimes you don't have to get it just perfect, you just got to get it running.